that you're doing well and staying healthy and safe and having a great week. I've had a request to record some lecture videos on YouTube. So, what I'm going to try to do is for each lesson and each module on Canvas, I'm going to try to have a few lecture videos that explain the material that we're covering in the modules. So if you feel like you already understand the material about the judicial branch, then you of course do not have to listen to this lecture video. But if you'd like, some extra information, or you feel like it would help you absorb the information to see it and hear it one more time, then hopefully these videos will be helpful. And as usual, please do not hesitate to give me feedback on these videos if there are any things I can be doing differently or better to help you all learn. Okay, so this video is going to be about the judicial branch of government. And if you've started on the Canvas modules, you might have noticed that when we talk about the judicial branch of government, we're really talking about three different court systems in the U.S. So we have the federal court system, the state court system, and also the tribal justice systems. Now, one of the terms that's important to know about is jurisdiction, which describes a court's authority to hear certain cases. Appellate jurisdiction is the authority of a court to review decisions that were made by lower courts. So higher courts often can consider repealing or revising the rulings made by lower courts. An appeal is a rehearing of a case because the losing party in the original trial argues that a point of law was not applied properly in the original case. Now, due to the influence of federalism on our democracy, we have two court systems, the federal court system and the state court system in California. We'll start by discussing the federal court system. There are three levels in the federal court system. The lowest level is the district court. This has 94 judicial districts in 50 states and U.S. territories. And there's no appellate jurisdiction in the district courts. This means there's original jurisdiction only. That just means that the district courts can hear court cases for the first time, but they don't have the power to revise or review court cases that have been decided in other courts. They can really only make decisions about court cases that occur in the district courts. The second level in the federal court system is the Courts of Appeal. This is the intermediate level of the court systems. There are 12 regional circuit courts, including the Washington, D.C. Circuit. Now, the Courts of Appeal have no original jurisdiction. They're strictly appellate courts. So again, what this means is the Courts of Appeal are responsible for reviewing decisions that were made in the district courts. So if someone loses a case in a district court and they think that the law was applied improperly, or perhaps some piece of evidence was mishandled, or maybe their lawyer was incompetent, or whatever, some big issue with the case, then they can appeal in a court of appeal. So that's an option. Now, the third and highest court in the federal system is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has 9 justices. They meet in Washington, D.C., and the Supreme Court has appeals jurisdiction and limited original jurisdiction over some cases. So the Supreme Court is responsible for hearing cases that made it to a court of appeal, and maybe the people who lost in the Court of Appeal. They lost the appeal. They still think that they have a good case, so they appeal or petition the Supreme Court to hear their case. So the Supreme Court heads the judicial branch of the U.S. government. It's the only court established by the Constitution. Decisions made by the Supreme Court are usually of national importance and have far-reaching effects on the lives of American citizens and residents. The motto of the Supreme Court is equal justice under the law. When questions concerning particular laws arise in lower courts, the justices who make up the Supreme Court are responsible for explaining and interpreting the U.S. Constitution. All of the other courts in the U.S. must follow the ruling or the decision made by the justices of the Supreme Court. The U.S. Constitution also gives the Supreme Court the power to judge whether federal, state, and local governments are acting within the law. The Supreme Court can also decide if a president's action is unconstitutional. The decisions of the Supreme Court are absolute and final. It is the court of last resort. So in contrast, the decisions and judgments reached in lower courts may be appealed or questioned. Thousands of requests for rulings reach the Supreme Court each year. Fewer than 150 are actually considered and ruled upon by the Supreme Court justices. Now, who are the justices of the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court has a Chief Justice or a head judge and 8 associate justices. The justices are appointed by the President and approved by a vote of the Senate. The justices serve for life unless they choose to retire or resign. Their job is to interpret laws passed by Congress. Since our government was established, more than 100 justices have served on the court, and the majority of them have been white and male. However, there are some notable firsts. Thurgood Marshall was the first African-American Supreme Court justice appointed by President Johnson in 1967. He ruled over the famous Marshall Court, which was very influential. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman named to the Supreme Court. She was appointed by President Reagan in 1981. Sonia Sotomayor was the first Latina Supreme Court justice appointed by President Obama in 2009. So I'm going to conclude this video now. I'm creating these lecture videos on YouTube, and they only allow you to upload a few minutes of video in each go. So I'll stop the lecture here for a second, and then you'll see some other short videos which are a continuation of this discussion of the judicial branch of government in the module section of Canvas. So if you wish to continue listening to the lecture, just click on the play button for the next video.